When wild places fall silent, danger often moves first. Bears circle camps, test walls, and strike when people least expect it. One small mistake, like food left outside or a noise in the dark, can draw a predator closer than anyone realizes. From peaceful family trips to a research camp rampage, calm moments can turn to terror in seconds. In this video, we'll dive into 7 real bear encounters that reveal how little protection humans truly have in the forest. In October 2025, the Thompson family left their home in Washington state to spend a quiet weekend in the Alaska wilderness. Mark Thompson, a careful planner who loved the outdoors, had spent years taking his family on short camping trips across the region. His wife, Emily Thompson, enjoyed photographing rivers, plants, and open landscapes. Their teenage children, Noah and Claire, were used to long drives, tall spruce forests, and wide stretches of untouched land. The family traveled in a sturdy motorhome that Mark had maintained for many seasons. It carried cooking supplies, extra blankets, fishing gear, and food, all neatly stored in side compartments. They looked forward to colder air, long trails, and peaceful hours near calm water. Mark had worked as an electrician for most of his life, while Emily had spent many years teaching young children at a local school. Both parents valued time away from busy towns, knowing these moments helped their family stay close. Noah played sports and often trained before school, while Claire enjoyed sketching plants and wildlife during their trips. The children were excited about seeing early snow in Alaska, something they rarely witnessed at home. All 4 found comfort in the presence of trees and distant mountains. As they reached a remote forest clearing, soft snow covered the ground, and the air felt sharp and cold. The motorhome settled near the tree line, where tall pines formed dark shapes against the growing night. The family set up their space with ease, placing supplies inside and checking the surroundings before resting. They were unaware that the season had been harsh for wildlife. Early storms and a poor berry crop had pushed grizzlies closer to places used by travelers. Many animals searched wider areas for food, following even faint scents carried on the cold wind. Hours passed quietly until deep night settled over the clearing. Around midnight, a massive grizzly moved between the trees. Hunger guided the animal toward new scents drifting from the forest floor. The smell came from the motorhome's exterior food compartment, where stored items created a tempting trail. The large bear stepped from the dark brush into the clearing, its heavy paws leaving deep marks in the thin snow. It approached the vehicle slowly at first, nose raised, breathing clouds of warm air into the cold night. The animal circled the motorhome, brushing against the metal siding. Its movement sent small vibrations through the walls, waking the family inside. Mark felt the motorhome shift slightly as the bear pressed against one side. The animal tested the structure with steady force, pushing and scraping. Snow fell from the roof with each heavy impact. The family gathered in the cab, heartbeats rising as the bear struck the lower panels, exploring latches and seams. The first sharp hit against the door marked the beginning of a long and frightening night, as the grizzly began its determined effort to reach the food stored underneath the vehicle. The sharp hit against the door grew into a steady rhythm as the massive bear pushed harder, shaking the motorhome with slow, powerful strikes. Each heavy move caused storage bins and loose supplies inside the small space to rattle. The family stayed pressed together in the cab, trying to remain calm while the vehicle trembled around them. Outside, the animal continued circling, its thick fur brushing against the metal as it searched for any weakness. Snow drifted around its large frame, and the cold air carried the steady sound of its breathing. The bear fixed its attention on the exterior compartment beneath the vehicle, scraping with strong swipes. The metal groaned under the repeated blows. The motorhome rocked from side to side as the giant paws struck the panels. In the cramped interior, small items rolled across the floor as the family clung to sturdy parts of the cab. Hours passed as the grizzly tested every latch and hinge, trying to reach the scent that had drawn it from the forest. The winter air outside remained thick and quiet, save for the constant noise of claws against the vehicle. At one point, the bear shifted its attack to the windows. It struck the glass with enough force to send cracks spreading across one panel. Shards of splintered frost and loose debris scattered inside as the window broke. Cold air rushed in through the damaged opening, covering the interior with a thin layer of snow. The family pulled back, avoiding falling pieces as the bear moved again, pacing and hitting new sections of the motorhome. Time dragged. The animal continued pressing against doors, vents, and outer covers, showing no sign of stopping. For nearly 7 hours, the clearing echoed with continuous pounding. The motorhome collected long scratches and deep dents as the bear followed its instinct to reach the food. Only when a faint glow of distant lights appeared through the trees did the pattern change. A ranger truck moved across the nearby road, and its beams cut into the clearing. The powerful animal paused, turned its head, and slowly backed away from the vehicle. After a moment, it retreated into the snowy forest and disappeared between the dark trunks. The family stepped out when the danger passed. Their arms and legs were marked with bruises from the long night, and exhaustion showed in their movements. The motorhome stood damaged but still upright, bearing the clear signs of the long encounter. That night left them with a lasting understanding of how determined a hungry grizzly can be, even against a large vehicle meant for protection. In August 2024, the Roberts family prepared their countryside home in rural Vermont for a late summer garden party. The warm season had been kind to their property, with tall maple trees surrounding the backyard and bright flowers lining the stone walkway. Samuel Roberts, the head of the household, enjoyed hosting gatherings for friends and neighbors. He worked as a local carpenter, known for building sturdy wooden furniture and helping anyone who needed an extra hand. His wife, Ellen Roberts, spent weeks tending the garden, ensuring the yard looked welcoming to guests. Their teenage daughter, Lily, loved outdoor events and helped arrange colorful decorations along the lawn. The family invited a mix of old friends, co-workers, and families from nearby homes. Many of them brought young children, expecting a peaceful afternoon of food and laughter. Tables were set beneath the shade of tall trees, piled with bowls of fruit, trays of grilled meat, and large coolers filled with ice. The scent drifted through the warm air, mixing with the smell of fresh grass and flowers. People began to gather in small groups, greeting one another and enjoying the calm setting. The Roberts home sat near a stretch of forest that ran along the edge of their land. The woods were usually quiet, home to deer, foxes, and many birds. Black bears lived in the region as well, but sightings were rare that close to the property. Still, wildlife experts often warned residents to secure trash bins and avoid leaving food outdoors for long periods. Samuel believed the yard was safe since the party was supervised and the guests stayed close to the tables. As the afternoon sun warmed the lawn, a faint rustling sounded beyond the hedge at the far edge of the yard. No one paid attention at first, assuming it was the wind moving through leaves. Laughter rose from the tables as children ran around the garden, playing tag between shrubs. The guests continued to serve themselves from the buffet laid across the long wooden table. Suddenly, the hedge shook harder, and a large shape pushed through the branches. A hungry black bear, drawn by the strong scent of grilled food and open coolers, lumbered into the yard. The animal's head lifted as it sniffed the air, stepping forward with slow but heavy movements. Chairs toppled as the bear brushed past them, and the garden filled with the sound of scraping metal and cracking wood. Guests reacted instantly. Many scattered back toward the house, stumbling over shoes and table legs. Coolers tipped over as the bear pawed at them, sending ice and cans rolling across the grass. Some guests grabbed folding chairs and drinks, tossing them in different directions to distract the animal. The sudden noise caused the bear to pause, but the scent of food kept it focused on the buffet. Near the tables, a man attempted to help a frightened child climb onto a picnic bench. As he lifted the child higher, the bear swiped, leaving long scratches across his arm. The party had turned into chaos in seconds. The sudden injury added even more panic to the yard. The man stepped back, holding his scratched arm while the child clung to the edge of the picnic bench, frozen with fear. Ellen guided nearby guests toward the porch, urging them to stay behind the railing as they crossed the lawn quickly. The bear sniffed at scattered plates, nudging bowls and pushing overturned chairs aside with slow, deliberate motions. Every shift of its weight sent grass bending under its paws. Samuel kept his distance, while still trying to guide people towards safer spots near the house. The noise of footsteps, falling cups, and shifting tables filled the warm air. The bear circled the buffet with wide steps, dragging its claws lightly along the surface of the wooden table and causing more food to spill across the grass. Colorful fruit rolled downhill toward a cluster of flower pots, leaving a trail that the animal followed with focused attention. Near the far corner of the yard, several guests made noise to slow the animal's progress. They tapped containers, waved jackets, and moved carefully around obstacles. Their actions caused the bear to pause every few seconds, unsure of which direction the sounds came from. These small delays gave Samuel enough time to help the injured man and the child reach the porch, where they received basic care from other guests. The bear eventually lost interest in the yard as the distractions continued. It gave a final sweep of its head along the buffet table, sniffing through the remaining scents. Then it turned toward the hedge it had entered from, pushing through the branches with steady force. Leaves scattered behind it as it disappeared into the trees. The yard fell silent except for the soft hum of insects and the slow rustle of wind across the grass. Once the danger had passed, the guests gathered on the porch, catching their breath and checking on one another. The man's scratched arm was cleaned and wrapped, and the child sat beside him, still shaken but safe. Tables lay overturned across the lawn, coolers spilled open, and food littered the grass, marking the chaotic path the bear had taken. The Roberts family understood that the event served as a serious reminder of living near a wild habitat. Local officials later emphasized the need to secure outdoor meals and keep food sources away from open spaces, especially during warm months. Though the guests left with shaken nerves, they were grateful that the injuries had been minor and that quick reactions had prevented something far worse. In August 2025, a small settlement in the Amur region of Russia prepared for another quiet evening as temperatures began to cool toward autumn. The village sat far from major towns, surrounded by thick forest where bears, elk, and boar roamed. Inside the local police station, 3 officers finished their daily tasks. Officer Mikhail Baranov, 41, had served the region for nearly 2 decades. He grew up nearby, learning early how remote life demanded strength, calm judgment, and steady habits. His work focused on helping villagers with emergencies, fires, and wildlife concerns. Working beside him was Officer Yevgeny Pavlov, 36, known for his dedication to long shifts and careful record-keeping. He often handled supply orders and kept equipment in good condition, making sure the small station could function through storms and long winter months. The youngest among them was Officer Viktor Melnikov, 28, eager to prove himself in the demanding region. He handled patrols, tracked local issues, and learned from the older officers how to deal with sudden changes in harsh conditions. The 3 formed a small but reliable team, responsible for the village's safety. Behind the station, an exterior shed held extra food for long shifts. Canned meals, bread, dried items, and a few boxes of packaged goods were stored inside. The shed was old, with thin walls that had weakened through years of rain, snow, and freezing wind. The officers planned to repair it before the heavy cold arrived, but the task kept getting delayed by other responsibilities. No one expected the shed to attract danger so soon. The season had been unusually dry. Berries were scarce, plants withered early, and wildlife began moving closer to human areas. A massive Ussuri grizzly, struggling to find enough food, wandered through the forest surrounding the village. The strong smell of stored goods drifted on the wind, pulling the animal toward the buildings. Quiet streets offered no signs of people outside, and the night sky carried only the soft hum of insects. As darkness settled, a storm pushed heavy clouds across the region. Wind floated through narrow lanes while the police station's lights glowed against the scattered shadows. Inside, Mikhail reviewed notes from the day, Yevgeny sorted gear, and Viktor prepared for a short patrol. None of them noticed the growing presence near the shed. Close to midnight, the bear reached the back of the station. Hunger pushed the huge animal forward as it tested the thin structure. The first strike against the shed wall sent a wave of noise through the quiet grounds. Glass jars rattled, hinges bent, and wooden boards cracked under the force. Growls echoed across the narrow alley behind the station as the bear tore into the weak entryway. Inside, the officers stiffened at the sudden crash. Another violent smash shook the building as the bear moved toward the main walls of the station itself. Shouts and hurried movement filled the room while the structure trembled from the assault. The danger outside was growing fast, and the officers had only moments to react. The station walls shook again as the huge Grizzly pushed against the main structure. The metal frame of a side window buckled under the repeated impacts. A final hit sent glass scattering across the floor, allowing freezing wind and debris to rush inside. The officers scrambled to block the opening, but the bear's strength overwhelmed every effort. The heavy animal pried at the weak side door next, its claws tearing through wood as fragments fell in large pieces. The door gave way, and the bear forced itself inside the narrow hallway. Mikhail and Yevgeny tried to hold their ground, but the powerful predator pushed through them with unstoppable force. A single strike sent Mikhail backward, his body slamming into a wall with devastating force. He collapsed instantly, the injuries too severe to survive. Yevgeny attempted to raise his firearm, but the bear lunged before he could aim. A deep swipe across his side sent him to the ground, bleeding heavily as he struggled to breathe. Victor, trapped near a reinforced interior door, felt the building shake beneath the weight of the chaos. He backed into a small storage room, pulling the heavy door shut before crawling behind stacked boxes. The confined space shielded him from falling debris as the bear continued attacking the main room. Roars echoed through the narrow corridor, mixing with the sound of overturned furniture and splintering wood. Minutes stretched, the violence slowly fading as the bear moved through the wreckage. It overturned crates, sniffed along the floor, and scraped at loose supplies. Finding no more food, the giant predator finally turned back toward the open side entrance. The storm outside carried drifting leaves and cold air into the destroyed station as the animal vanished into the night. Silence settled over the ruined building as Victor waited, barely moving. When he finally crawled out, he slipped on broken boards and scattered equipment. He reached his injured colleagues, but both had succumbed to their wounds. The loss weighed heavily on him as he looked around at the shattered interior and the destruction left behind. At dawn, reinforcements arrived, following reports of the storm and the silent radio lines. They found Victor shaken, scratched, and exhausted, surrounded by broken walls and damaged supplies. The tragedy spread quickly through the village, reminding residents how dangerous hungry grizzlies could become when natural food sources failed. The station stood as a grim warning that even strong buildings could fall in seconds when a desperate predator reached a human settlement. In October 2024, along the steep and isolated cliffs of the Kodiak Archipelago in Alaska, hunters Sam Morris and Lena Morris moved carefully along a narrow ledge above a fog-covered fjord. The cold morning air clung to their jackets, and the mist hid most of the landscape below them. Sam, known in his hometown for his steady focus during long hunts, had spent years studying mountain terrain and learning how to move safely across difficult ground. His wife, Lena, shared the same love for remote wilderness. She had trained as a guide, helping visitors understand how to respect the mountains and the wildlife that lived there. Together they formed a strong team, relying on patience and calm thinking during long expeditions. This late-season trip had taken them far into the rugged cliffs in search of mountain goats. The animals often stayed high on the ridges during colder months, feeding on patches of grass hidden between rocks. Sam carried a pack filled with rope, warm layers, and a first aid kit, while Lena managed their navigation tools. The fog was thicker than usual, drifting in heavy sheets along the rocky walls. Every step required slow, steady movement to avoid slipping on icy patches. They walked along the ledge with great care, knowing there was little room for mistakes. The fjord below stretched into a deep valley, filled with swirling fog that made it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. As the wind shifted, the mist rolled over the cliffs, giving the entire ridge an eerie and silent atmosphere. What they did not know was that a massive Kodiak bear had picked up their scent earlier in the morning. The bear had been searching for food along the forest edge, following trails that often led to leftover scraps from hunters or shifting wildlife paths. This season had been harsh, and the lack of easy meals kept the bear moving for long hours. As Sam and Lena climbed the narrow ledge, the bear followed silently, hidden by the thick fog that covered the fjord. When the pair reached a more exposed section of the ridge, where the rocks sloped sharply downward, a sudden movement broke the quiet around them. From the swirling mist behind them, the enormous Kodiak bear lunged forward, cutting off their only escape route. Its large frame filled the narrow space, blocking the ledge entirely. Sam spun to react, but his boots slid across a layer of ice. He lost his balance and fell hard onto the rocks. The impact scraped his arm and twisted his ankle sharply, sending pain through his leg and leaving him unable to stand quickly. Lena pressed herself against a large rock outcrop, trying to stay steady on the slippery surface. With the bear only steps away and the steep drop below them, the danger became immediate and overwhelming. The mist wrapped around the ridge once more, hiding the surrounding landscape and trapping them on the narrow ledge. The bear moved slowly, testing the space, shifting its weight on the icy ground. Sam and Lena realized that they had no easy way out, and the narrow ridge gave them almost no room to move or retreat as the fog thickened once more. The massive Kodiak bear paused on the narrow ledge, its breath rising in slow clouds that drifted through the thick fog. The ground beneath Sam and Lena trembled slightly each time the animal shifted its weight. Sam braced his injured leg against the rock surface, trying to keep from sliding farther toward the drop below. Lena stayed pressed against the outcrop, gripping her trekking poles with both hands. The cold wind swept along the ridge, carrying the sharp scent of wet stone and sea mist as the bear studied the trapped pair. The ledge felt smaller by the second. The bear moved with steady steps, lowering its head to sniff the scattered supplies that had spilled from Sam's pack during his fall. It pawed one of the bags, pushing it toward the edge. A small metal container clattered against the rock and tumbled down the fjord wall. The sound disappeared quickly into the fog, swallowed by the vast emptiness below. Lena tightened her stance, knowing she needed to make herself appear bigger despite the narrow space pressing against her back. Sam forced himself upright on one knee, wincing as pain surged through his ankle. He lifted a trekking pole high and struck it against the rock. The sharp clang vibrated through the ledge, briefly cutting through the heavy mist. Lena followed his lead, hitting another pole against her outcrop. The metallic noise echoed faintly across the fjord, but it only caused the bear to slow its steps rather than retreat. The animal circled again, its heavy paws scraping the icy ground. Each movement tested the edge of the ledge, sending small ice fragments drifting away. The fog wrapped around the group, making every shift of the bear's body appear larger and more threatening. Sam breathed slowly, staying as calm as he could while balancing his weight on the injured leg. Minutes stretched agonizingly as the bear paced. The ridge offered no safe direction, and the freezing air made every breath feel sharp and shallow. Lena kept her focus forward, maintaining her position against the rock while lifting her arms to make herself appear taller. Sam continued striking the pole, hoping the repeated noise would discourage the animal from moving closer. Then, without warning, a strong gust pushed across the fjord. The fog thinned rapidly, swept aside by the sudden wind. For the first time since the bear appeared, the full cliffside became visible. The wide forest slope below emerged through the clearing mist, offering the animal a clear route away from the ridge. The bear lifted its head, ears turning toward the open space revealed beneath the ledge. It hesitated only a moment before shifting its weight away from Sam and Lena. With controlled steps, the animal backed toward a narrow descent leading into the forest. It paused briefly, sniffing the wind, then moved off the ledge and disappeared down the slope, leaving the hunters alone in the thinning fog. Relief swept through Sam and Lena, though exhaustion made their limbs weak. Lena crossed the ledge carefully and helped Sam stand. Together they moved slowly along the safer portion of the ridge, putting distance between themselves and the place where the bear had cornered them. By the time they reached lower ground, the fog had lifted enough to reveal faint sunlight through the clouds. They rested near a patch of moss-covered stones, checking Sam's injured ankle and scraped arm. Though shaken, both understood how close they had come to disaster. The combination of slick terrain, poor visibility, and a hungry apex predator had turned a simple goat hunt into a dangerous ordeal. In the days that followed, the memory of the event stayed strong in their minds. They returned home with a deeper respect for the unpredictable nature of the Kodiak wilderness, aware that even experienced hunters could be caught off guard by the sudden appearance of a powerful bear hidden within the fog. In May 2021, a quiet wildlife park near Ljubljana, Slovenia, prepared for another routine day of animal care. The grounds were small compared to major European zoos, but the staff took pride in their work. Among them was caretaker Luca Marin, a 34-year-old employee known for his calm nature and steady focus. Luca had spent much of his adult life working with rescued wildlife, learning how to read body language, manage feeding schedules, and support animals brought in from remote regions. His co-worker, 30-year-old technician Petra Dolinar, was trained in enclosure upkeep, repairs, and safety checks. She had joined the team after completing conservation studies, hoping to help improve habitats for animals under human care. Both caretakers had been assigned to monitor a large European brown bear that had recently been relocated from a mountain reserve. The bear was strong, restless, and still adjusting to its new surroundings. It paced often, testing logs, sniffing corners, and pressing against the reinforced walls. The move had been necessary due to shifting territory patterns in the mountains, but the sudden change placed stress on the animal. Luca and Petra understood that such transitions took time, and they followed strict rules while working near the enclosure. The habitat itself sat on the edge of the park, surrounded by tall fencing and a cluster of trees that provided shade. Inside the space, keepers had placed rocks, water features, and feeding platforms meant to mimic natural terrain. However, the structure had older sections that required regular checks. Some areas had been patched before, and maintenance crews planned to upgrade several panels in the coming weeks. Until then, the staff worked carefully, keeping a safe distance from the bear during daily duties. On a mild morning, Luca and Petra walked toward the enclosure to inspect feeding stations and prepare for general maintenance. The bear moved slowly around the habitat, barely visible behind thick brush and wooden barriers. Luca carried tools for the inspection, while Petra reviewed a checklist to ensure food placement and structural parts were secure. They followed the same path they used every week, believing the routine would remain uneventful. As they approached the outer fence, a faint metallic creak rose from one of the older panels. The bear shifted its weight toward the sound, ears turning and body stiffening. Luca paused, noticing the tension in its stance. The air felt still around the enclosure, and the quiet morning atmosphere grew heavier. Petra continued examining a feeding point, unaware of how quickly the situation was changing. The bear stepped forward, breathing hard as it scanned the area. Its movements became sharper, driven by stress from the relocation and the unfamiliar layout of the enclosure. It moved toward a weakened section of fencing that had shown signs of wear in previous inspections. Then, without warning, the bear lunged. The impact shook the entire structure, bending the damaged panel outward as the heavy predator slammed against it with full force. The peaceful morning turned into sudden danger. The weakened panel bent outward as the heavy animal pressed again, sending dust and metal flakes into the air. Luca moved back instinctively, but the force of the second impact pushed part of the fencing forward, creating a narrow opening. The bear forced its head through the gap, widening it with powerful shoulders. In the chaos, Luca raised his arm to shield himself as the animal swiped through the damaged space. Sharp claws tore deep lines across his forearm, leaving bright streaks of blood on his skin. The pain pulsed through him instantly, and he staggered away from the enclosure, trying to keep his balance on the uneven ground. Petra heard the noise and turned just as the animal pushed even farther through the broken structure. She attempted to move out of the path, but her foot slipped on loose gravel. The bear's forward motion struck the fencing again, sending the metal outward with a sharp jolt. The sudden movement threw Petra backward, and she hit the ground hard. A painful shock spread through her shoulder as she landed, and the impact left her unable to rise right away. Bruises formed quickly along her side, and she felt a sharp ache at every small motion. The bear remained halfway through the bent panel, frustrated by the narrow space. It pawed at the gap, shaking the fencing with heavy blows that echoed across the enclosure. Its agitation came from tension built over days of adjustment, and the unusual shape of the habitat added to its confusion. Luca pressed his uninjured hand against his wounded arm, trying to stop the bleeding while stepping as far back as he could. Petra rolled slightly to keep distance, careful not to worsen the pain in her shoulder. Other staff members heard the commotion and rushed toward the habitat. They saw Luca bleeding heavily and Petra lying near the ground, and they immediately triggered the emergency alarm. The loud signal echoed through the park, sending workers into practiced motion. Tranquilizer teams arrived with equipment, keeping low and steady as they approached the enclosure from a safer angle. The bear continued pushing at the bent fencing, but the crew kept their distance, waiting for a clear shot. A trained specialist aimed carefully and released a dart that struck the bear's thick hide. The animal reacted with a sharp turn, pulling back into the enclosure with heavy steps. A second dart followed, and the bear slowed, its powerful body losing strength as the medication took effect. Gradually, it collapsed against the inner barrier, breathing heavily until the tranquilizers subdued it completely. Staff secured the damaged panel with temporary supports and moved to assist the injured workers. Luca was helped to a medical station, where the deep scratches along his forearm were cleaned and treated. The cuts were long and painful, but he remained alert. Petra was carried to another room, where her bruises and fractured shoulder were stabilized. Her fall had caused significant pain, yet she remained conscious as doctors worked quickly. Both employees survived thanks to their colleagues' quick action. The park immediately reviewed its safety methods, recognizing the need for stronger structures and improved inspection routines. Engineers were called in to redesign parts of the enclosure, especially older sections that had worn down over time. Management also updated training to prepare workers for sudden changes in animal behavior during stressful periods. Visitors were kept away from the habitat until all repairs were complete. News spread through the region, reminding people that even managed animals could show sudden force. The incident left a lasting impression on the staff. Luca carried a set of scars that marked the event, while Petra endured weeks of recovery before returning to light duties. The wildlife park strengthened every part of its system, accepting that large predators demanded constant respect. The attack became a clear lesson. Even in controlled spaces, nature's power remained unpredictable and immense. April 2025 settled over Svalbard with cold air, pale skies, and wide sheets of drifting sea ice. A group of glaciologists traveled across this frozen landscape to study meltwater channels that carve through the surface each spring. Their small team included Eric Hallen, a field leader with years of experience working in harsh polar conditions. Eric had spent most of his career measuring ice movement and changes in snowpack across the Arctic, learning how quickly the environment could shift from calm to dangerous. He carried notebooks, sampling tools, and a deep respect for every creature that lived in the far north. Beside him, Lena Overgaard worked, a specialist who focused on glacial melt rates and seasonal changes in freshwater flow. She had trained in multiple cold regions and understood how important precise readings were in an environment that constantly changed with temperature and wind. The rest of the research group handled equipment, data logging, and safety checks. All of them had traveled across these ice flows before, setting up small camps far from main bases so they could reach untouched areas. Their temporary camp stood on a large, stable floe, surrounded by jagged ridges and channels. Tents formed a narrow line facing the wind, each anchored deep into firm snow. Small containers of food, tools, and measuring gear sat stacked beside the central tent. The day had been long but successful, with each researcher collecting samples as meltwater trickled across the ice. As the sun dipped low behind the horizon, the temperature dropped sharply, and the sky took on a dim blue tone familiar to polar nights. By evening, the team retreated into their tents to review notes and rest. The silence outside felt heavy, broken only by distant cracking ice and the faint breath of wind. None of them sensed movement across the frozen surface, where little shadows shifted in the far distance. The region had suffered from poor sea ice that year, forcing polar bears to travel farther inland in search of food. Hunger pushed them into areas where people rarely camped. Near midnight, the calm broke without warning. A massive polar bear slipped from the dark edges of the floe and approached the camp with slow, deliberate steps. The animal's nose lifted toward the scent of stored supplies. In a sudden burst of force, it lunged at one of the tents. Canvas tore instantly as claws ripped through fabric, sending poles snapping and supplies flying across the snow. Inside the collapsing tent, a scientist was thrown to the ground as sharp edges and falling gear pressed against them. Deep cuts formed along their arm and shoulders as the heavy fabric folded inward. Other team members reacted immediately, scrambling into nearby tents. Their hearts pounded as they scrambled to create makeshift barriers. The polar bear continued to move through the camp, leaving deep footprints in the snow. The attack had only begun, and the night stretched ahead with cold, fear, and the sound of a predator testing everything around it. The torn tent flattened completely as the polar bear continued to push against it, its enormous weight crushing the canvas and scattering more tools across the snow. The injured scientists struggled to crawl free from the heavy fabric, while cold air rushed over open wounds. Blood soaked into the snow beneath their arm and shoulders, and each movement sent sharp pain through the damaged muscles. Inside the nearby shelters, team members braced themselves, listening to the low huffs and heavy footsteps as they moved through the camp. Eric pulled metal poles closer, gripping them tightly as the bear circled again. The creature moved with slow confidence, its paws pressing deep impressions into the surface. Snow slipped from its coat as it lifted its head to inspect each tent, its breath rising in white clouds. A harsh scrape sounded as the predator dragged its claws across a storage box, peeling insulation away in long strips that fluttered in the wind. The team knew they had to act to keep the animal from breaking through another shelter. Lena grabbed a flare and struck it until bright light spread across the interior of her tent. She held the burning stick near the thin wall, letting the glow shine through the fabric. The red light flickered against the snow outside, creating shifting shapes that briefly distracted the predator. Eric and another researcher struck metal poles together, sending loud clanging across the ice floe. For a moment, the bear paused. It turned its head toward the sound, ears twitching as it tried to determine the source. But hunger pushed it forward again. It moved toward the next tent, pressing its weight against the side until the thin fabric stretched dangerously inward. The structure leaned as poles bent under the strain. Snow fell from the roof as the frame buckled. The researchers increased the noise, banging harder, sending vibrations through the cold air. Another flare burned inside a different tent, filling the camp with bright pulses of red that glowed against the ice ridges. The combined sight and sound forced the bear to step back, but it did not leave. It paced slowly across the open space between shelters, testing the ground and waiting for a weakness. Minutes stretched into long, tense intervals. The predator circled again, its large body brushing against loose supplies and fallen gear. The injured scientist was finally pulled from the collapsed tent by two teammates who crawled through a narrow gap between broken poles. They dragged the wounded figure behind a small snow wall, using it as cover while they checked the bleeding. Cloth strips were wrapped tightly around the deep cuts to keep the cold air from worsening the wounds. The bear continued its slow patrol until a distant sound echoed across the floe. A faint thrum vibrated through the ice, growing louder. A helicopter on a routine route passed far overhead, and its bright spotlight swept across the landscape. The beam moved across the snow, flashing over the camp and casting the bear's shadow in long lines. The predator hesitated, turning its head toward the sky. The flash of brightness and the strange noise broke its focus. The polar bear backed away from the tents, stepping toward the darker edge of the floe. It moved with steady caution before disappearing into the night, leaving long prints behind. The camp fell silent, broken only by the wind. The researchers, exhausted and shaken, gathered, helped the injured member into a temporary shelter, and called for medical evacuation. Blood-stained snow surrounded the torn tent, and scattered equipment lay buried in drifting ice. The group realized how easily a simple research night could turn into a struggle for survival in the Arctic, where one predator and one shift in sea ice could change everything in moments.